Speak your mind because your spouse can't read it. Can I get a what from all the men out there?
Even when you really want them to.
Yeah. Can I get a shout out from the women?
I think it's just recognizing that you can either like refresh your spouse or you can overload them.
Yeah,
and that's just something that you've got to consider when you're feeling overloaded yourself.
That's the spirit of what we're trying to capture here with never say never, never say never. Shout out Beebs. And don't say always either. That's the sequel. Don't say always either.
Time for love again. My time for love is here.
Welcome back to Quality Time with Gabe and Grace.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Grace, and this is episode 15.
Otherwise known as the anniversary episode.
Yes, this will be dropping just one day after our 9th wedding anniversary.
Yup.
What do you think
have
about
been
that?
doing it for a while.
Yeah, 9 years. It does sound like quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember being in our newlywed phase and, having friends that were around that age and that like depth of marriage and just thinking, oh my gosh, that's such a long time. But now that we've hop, skipped and jumped our way into 9, it's like,
wow.
It feels more understandable that you can just sort of like, again, blink and then find yourself
Right,
here.
yeah.
But also, we talk about this all the time, that our marriage has had so many eras, you know what I mean? Where, like, we were just in a part of town that we used to live when we first got married yesterday. And just, like, driving by our old apartment area and just thinking...
Life was so different.
What were we doing? We were babies, We
Yes.
just had no clue what was ahead of us. And then fast forward to just being old and having mortgages and all the things now. And it's like... It's really cool to see how far we've come, but also to still feel like, we're so early in this.
Definitely.
We're shooting for 50 more.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, easily.
More.
Keep going. We're going to live
I'm going to be a
till
centenarian.
Mars.
What is it?
A centenarian? Yeah. The way you eat, you probably will. Yeah.
Let's do it. Come on.
Shout out Blue Zones. Am I right?
If we both live to 100, then we'll get like 70 years of marriage.
Oh my gosh.
Dude,
yeah, that is
let's
totally
go.
possible.
Goals.
Let's do it. Yeah. We decided.
That's it.
We're not
It's
dying.
So welcome to the anniversary episode. I mean, we kind of have a little bit of a theme running this week. We're going to
Yes.
talk somewhere along the lines of marriage. We'll get into that a little bit deeper in a moment, but
Yes.
let's start out with a little bit of quality over quantity.
Always.
If you're new to the show, quality over quantity is a segment we like to open up with, and it's really a moment for us to reflect on our week and think about some quality experience, product, moment, some happening in your life that is quality, just one, and that's what makes it quality over quantity.
Yes.
So what are you sharing this week for quality over quantity?
Yeah, mine is super mundane and practical,
Okay.
but just something that I, like the little boy in me, was very impressed with. So
Okay.
as our listeners know, if you've been following along, we are moving to the Tennessee area. For those of you who were wondering how we were getting there, you were wrong if you guessed Gabe trucking it in a U-Haul, because I said, not today, Satan. And so the alternative was renting a pod, P-O-D, and they come to the house, they deliver this huge kind of storage unit, container home type thing, into your driveway. And then you load it up and you tell them when to come back. And then they take it from you. They, transport it to your desired location. And then you unload it there, and that's the process. So that's what we did. And this week they came, and it was just I wanted to highlight what an incredible customer experience it was.
Yeah.
Again, not sponsored. But they came right when they said they would, first of all. Normally they give you like a window, and they were kind of like right in the window. Sometimes, delivery guys are like, yeah, it's between like 9 and 12. And then it's like 12:30 they come, or 8:45. And you're like, you said 9 and 12. Like,
Right.
I wasn't awake yet. So they came kind of like right in the middle. And then very quickly, we decided where it was going to go. And so what was really cool about it is they have this huge flatbed with like 4 independent wheels that like kind of lift the pod off of the flatbed and then sort of remote control off the flatbed and drop the thing, with precision. And so the guy's just literally remote controlling it like from the side. So when they first backed it in, I was kind of thinking, oh man, I wanted it like at least 2 feet that way. And he was like, my child, this is not my first, So He remote controlled it right into place and like set it perfectly, gave me the lock and key, and just generally was like, it was so simple, so easy. And so we've been loading the thing up now and getting it ready to go. And I just wanted to shout them out. Pods. I mean, who would have known that this would have made it into my quality over quantity experiences for the week?
These are the things, you know, that make your life better. I remember you came into the house after like meeting with the pod guy and you were just like smiling ear to ear.
I mean,
and I was
so
like,
lame.
What's up? And you were like, that was just such a good customer experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's important to shout out those companies because nowadays sometimes you pay a pretty penny and then you don't get like a great experience. And it's kind of like, man, makes you a little jaded. So it's nice when you run into a company that's like doing it right.
Yeah. So if you are ever moving a long distance, I would highly recommend Pods as a solution for you. And if you are not moving and you just want to kind of hang out with your bros, it's still pretty cool just to get one of those delivered. It gets a little hot. Maybe,
oh my gosh, and it attracts bugs around the outside of it.
Yeah, it's very strange. I was walking by the side of it at night and just walked into a swarm of like...
Are they like love bugs?
I don't know, just foreign insects that like made me scream like a girl. I was actually pushing our son in the stroller and I was like, ah, like did a barrel roll almost just to get him out of it because I thought I walked into like a, you know, wasp's nest or something like that. Yeah. But nope, just Florida insects.
Exactly. So my quality over quantity for this week is a brand called Easy Peasy.
Okay.
Easy Peasy, but it's the letters.
Nice.
And so I want to talk about this because I feel like a lot of people in my life are reaching out and saying like, hey, what should I put on my baby registry? Yeah. Or they're going to a baby shower. Like we have a baby shower on the calendar this week.
Yeah.
And so it's just prominent. I'm sure there's some listeners that this is going to hit home for, that it's going to help you out.
Yeah.
So our baby is between 6 and 12 months. We're using these items a lot, but they're basically feeding items. So bowls, plates, cups, you know, flatware, all that kind of stuff, but they're silicone, food grade safe, all that stuff, but they're very good. Like I've tried
they're like aesthetic too, which is kind of nice.
Exactly. Yeah. They're simple, they're minimal, and they actually stick to the high chair. So you want something that the baby's not going to be able to like pick up and fling off. And their stuff is just so good. Compared to some of the other products I've tried, they just stand alone. So we use them every day. They are quality over quantity, baby. And you can pick a pretty little color. But I also love, we've talked about this before with baby stuff, keeping it minimal.
Yeah.
If you just want to know like what items to order from Easy Peasy, I would say get the tiny cup to practice with open cup, and get the 3 compartment plate. It's like, looks like a little smiley face, and that's for meals. And then the little bowl with like the attached mat. And those items will go a long way. Nice. So that's all I'll say, but I hope that speaks to the moms, the friends of moms, etc.
Or just those of us who, you know, want easy cleanup and just really want to feed ourselves with silicone forks and spoons, you know?
Well, it would be very tiny portions. So, you know, if you're eating light, that might work for you. Small snacks.
Yes.
But mostly appropriate for baby.
Sounds good.
So let's get into this week's topic. Again, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
We are going to talk about 9 lessons we've learned in 9 years of marriage. So we've been taking some time this past week and kind of reflecting on the past 9 years. And we've been talking about more so like the growing pains of marriage, meaning you're constantly growing and you're constantly being refined in the marriage relationship. That's the whole point, right? Is like that we would become better within this relationship. In the Christian view, it's that we would become more like Christ, right? We would be refined. And so we're working out and smoothing out those rough edges. And that's what growing pains means, right? Like you're not mastering it. And that's what we said as we looked back at the last 9 years. We're like, we're not like marriage experts. Like we always say, we're not acing it in every category, but we're constantly learning. And these are 9 lessons that we have learned and we're still learning, meaning like we're still working them out. We're still fleshing them out in the day-to-day.
Yep.
So you want to start us out?
Yeah. So the first one we put on the list is don't share the first draft with your spouse. And so we'll unpack that.
What does that mean?
We were talking the other day how you and I have been relatively fortunate in that we have had a decent level of communication even from the beginning. And it's grown in many ways over the years of our marriage, but that's something that we always felt really comfortable and confident, even in our dating phase,
Yeah.
to just share everything with each other.
Sure.
The danger potentially in that kind of relational rhythm is that, and I'll speak for myself, is that like, let's say I'm talking about something in my career or some challenge at work or some conflict that I may be having with someone else in my life.
Sure.
And I come to you and I'm giving you the raw, unfiltered, no polish version of that story or that emotion. And oftentimes what I don't realize I'm doing is I'm kind of either painting a picture of this person or this situation in a very, distinct way for you that you can't really maybe even understand it or perceive it in any other way other than the way I just, presented it. And the other aspect of it is if it's something like spiritual or a struggle that I'm coming to you with, that I have not first kind of taken it to the Lord and said, God, can you help me figure out some of these emotions and filter and file away what needs to be filed away?
Yeah.
Then the danger, like I said, is that I can share that with you and potentially give you cause for alarm or concern where you might be thinking, wow, like he's really struggling, or he's, what we don't want to, like, this is such a nuanced piece. That's why we're starting at the top, because I'm not saying to keep secrets from each other or to limit the level of vulnerability and intimacy in your communication. But what I do think is that when you are so comfortable and confident and you're constantly sharing every little thing, like even down to like, oh my gosh, I was just in traffic and this guy cut me off and like, I'm so frustrated about it or whatever. You can end up just kind of dumping on your spouse and constantly sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly. But like most things, the good is probably the most forgotten stuff. And it's just the bad and the ugly that kind of piles up. And you start to feel like, man, all we do is complain with each other.
Right.
Yes. And so when we say don't share that first draft, what we're really trying to get to is, if there's a big thing that needs to be communicated, and let's say you're struggling with your emotions and it's raw and you're feeling frustrated or angry or whatever, if you are a believer and you live in that context of faith, I think a smart choice is always to submit that first draft to the Lord.
Go to God in prayer.
Exactly. And ask the Holy Spirit to help filter those thoughts, anything that's in you that's kind of raw, and that might have some sharp edges that would, cut your spouse, so to speak, because you can either accidentally cut your spouse or you can infect their way of thinking, where now you're both kind of in the pit of complaint and angst and fear or anxiety together. And now no one's on high ground to be able to pull the other out and speak common sense and truth into their lives and say, hey, I know you've had a hard day. Take a breath. Let's talk through this. Let's pray through this. And so we've just learned that the hard way, essentially, by us being so close and so oversharing that sometimes, we've had to come back to each other and apologize and say, I'm sorry. That was like a version that you didn't need to hear.
Right.
I needed to come to you with a little bit more filtered. Now, again, I can't stress enough. That's not to say that you need to sterilize yourselves for your spouse, because that defeats the purpose also.
Of course.
So this is like, you got to like really read between the lines and go with us here. But it's just so important, I think, the older you get and the more mature you get in your relationship, to not just lay every single burden on your spouse, because some of that is only for the Lord to handle.
Yeah. I think it's just recognizing that you can either like refresh your spouse or you can overload them.
Yeah,
and that's just something that you've got to consider when you're feeling overloaded yourself. I think of an earlier episode, we talked about 2 are better than 1, and how in Ecclesiastes it talks about, basically helping each other in that relationship. And so it's instead of like pulling your spouse down with you, is giving yourself a chance to be like strengthened in the Lord in prayer, and come again, still with vulnerability to your spouse, but also with like hope and things in your heart that God can give you with a no short supply. And you're not coming to your spouse first in putting it on them to solve whatever's going on inside of you, because that's ultimately not really your spouse's job. And so there's that like fine line of idolatry, right? Of like, if you think of idolatry being putting something else before God, it's putting your spouse before God and kind of treating them like your place of prayer, but it's actually just a place of complaint.
That's good.
So definitely a tough one, because it takes some discipline to refrain from doing that when you have started a habit of that. But we found, I think, that we both end up healthier and we're better able to help each other when we stick to that one.
Exactly.
So I'll go into the next one, which I think kind of flows right out of the first one. And the second one is don't get too comfortable. And in parentheses, we put gossip.
Dun, dun, dun.
So with this one, I think we've shared this with different people we've talked to who are married and looking for advice. Something like when people ask us, like, what's something you've learned in marriage? We often think about this one. And that is just, again, not to be so comfortable with your spouse that when you leave functions, when you leave gatherings, that you just go right into like talking about other people together.
Sure. Yeah.
It's something that if you're a very like reflective person, you might leave hanging out with people or an event or something, and you might want to like rehash it.
Yeah.
But it's easy with your spouse to go like, it's such a fine line, right? To fall into like being a critic or like picking things apart and like sort of entertaining yourself with that, just keeping yourself busy with that. It's like unproductive chatter. Yeah. And so I think it goes hand in hand with the first one. It's like the first one's like filtering your emotions. And the second one is really filtering your words and thinking like, is this producing fruit to talk about this with my spouse? Or am I just like being like, am I just running at the mouth? Like, do I need to just be quiet?
Yeah, exactly. And again, all of these are a little bit nuanced where, you know, you might hear don't gossip as a rule and you're like, yeah, duh, you know, that's obvious. But what we're really talking about is, like Grace said, you know, you leave a social function, even you leave a church service or some sort of public function thing, and you're walking away and you're like, what did you think of that song that they sang? Like the second one, you know, like the words were kind of weird or whatever. And like, you know, what you're doing is you're just sort of, you know, with your most trusted companion, you're kind of just reflecting and talking about it or this or that, or you're at dinner with someone and you're like, that was an interesting comment that so-and-so made, you know, and it's like the smallest, most innocuous little comment can then divulge or devolve into like both of you sharing details or just kind of like painting a picture of like someone or something or some place in a way that's just like not the healthiest. And so it's not enough just to say like, don't gossip. There's another angle to it that is really like, you know, don't allow yourself to become, you said it the best, to become critics together, you know, because, you know, you just want to be someone that encourages and builds up rather than someone that's like constantly making a comment about what could have been better, whether it's literally you're grading a performance or you're grading a conversation or you're grading, you know, someone's outfit, like something as silly as that. You could just, for all the married folks, y'all know, you get in the car and it's like, you start to like debrief, you know what I mean? Like right after a thing. And we've just learned that we need to be cognizant of the intention behind some of those conversations.
For sure. And I kind of have this little like picture in my mind of, you know, that, what is it, like Rain-X that you spray on your windshield and it helps the rain like really just like just kind of wick off. I'm thinking about how when you become like, when you get in the habit of constantly talking with your spouse about, you know, what happened at this place with so-and-so said this and that. You can get into that place where you're kind of like easily bothered, easily offended, and that's why you need to talk about it with your spouse. You know, you get kind of agitated.
Everyone's triggered.
And I just kind of think like help each other to like have that sort of Rain-X like sort of attitude, which is like, don't be easily offended. Don't be easily bothered. And you can help your spouse in that by like redirecting and being like, hey, well, did you think about it like this? Instead of like jumping in to the pit with them. I think that's enough said. If you've struggled with this at all, I think you're going to totally understand what we're saying. But just look at each other and be like, Rain-X.
Rain-X.
So, okay, let's go into the next one.
The next one is always avoid never and never say always.
That's a good one.
Yeah. What do we mean by that?
So with that one, I think it's as simple as it sounds. It's avoiding the use of words like never and always. So when you get into some sort of an argument or a heated conversation with your
tiff,
spouse,
if you will.
Yeah, a tiff. You might find yourself saying something like, hey, you never do blah, 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 or you always say blah, 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 blah. And these are really attacking words. These are very accusatory and they really box your partner in. And so we find ourselves, again, these are growing pains, right? So we're always working through this. So
Yes.
I
Always.
will,
And we're also never working through this.
I will put myself out there. I do often catch myself with this one where I'm like, you never, or you always.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, okay, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. The last 2 times that this happened, this is how it went down, and this is how it made me feel.
Yes.
And so it's like catching yourself and rewinding and really like speaking the reality instead of the exaggeration.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's it.
Yeah, 2 things are true in this. That one, always and never or almost never true statements in context to the conversation. And then the second thing is that oftentimes when we as the perpetrator, you know, are saying the words always and never, that's usually a result of something that's been uncommunicated, right? So you always do this. And what you're really saying is, I have not been able to either get through to you on this topic, or you know what, now that I think about it, I have not told you how much this bothers me.
It's like you've been doing this and it's been bugging me, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it for all the times I never said it before.
You always do that. And so you're just going back to your Rolodex of these memories and these offenses, like we said earlier.
Which, coming back to 1 Corinthians 13, we talked about in another episode, the love chapter, it says love keeps no record of wrongs.
Yeah.
So something to consider in the marriage.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. Scripture hits it right on the head with love keeps no record of wrong. And that's easier said than done. But that's the spirit of what we're trying to capture here with never say never, never say never. Shout out Beebs. And don't say always either. That's the sequel. Don't say always either.
That's awesome.
Oh, man.
Okay. So the next one, you are your spouse's bridge to your family.
Yeah.
This is a big one. I think that when you get married, you are, receiving another family, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of dynamic there that's going to be new to you. And I think we've both found that the best way to integrate into each other's family is to remember that we are the bridge. So meaning like we represent our family to our spouse and vice versa.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to kind of protect them from annoyances or like conflicts or
just misunderstandings really,
that are unnecessary for them to carry. And it's not, it's something that we probably need to work out in and of ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't need to like rope our partner into also carrying that. So of course, like you said earlier, I think we can be honest and open and vulnerable. Of course, we want to encourage that with your husband-wife relationship, but you also want to be careful just not to just damage that relationship that your spouse has with your family or your family has with your spouse by over sharing unnecessary information.
And
even, is that a good way to say that?
Let's get even more practical and specific. Like when you get married, there will be a decision to be made on whose side you go to for Thanksgiving or Christmas or some family thing.
Yeah.
It's not, I believe that it's not your job to communicate that to my family if we are deciding that we're going to go to your families this year. So like that's something that I need to communicate and be sort of the interpreter and the spokesperson for, because everyone's family has their own culture, like we talked about a couple episodes ago, and different way of relating and communicating. And it's not that I'm shielding you. I mean, you have a great relationship with them as well. You text them without me and, sometimes more than I text my own family.
Yeah.
But there are certain kind of big decisions or big communication opportunities that I just take the lead on because I don't want to leave any room for misunderstanding or offense or something like that. So we're talking really specific, practical things like that. And so really what we're boiling it down to is if there is a gap to cross, let's put it that way, then you are the bridge to, your spouse and your family.
I think you nailed it with the concept of coming from your own family culture, having your own way of communicating, being able to do it very clearly and like without confusion.
Yeah.
I think that makes you the best spokesperson, like to go back and forth between your spouse, your family unit that you've created and your family of origin with the most ease instead of like putting big communications on your significant others to then go back and communicate with your family about. I think we do that for each other and it becomes much more fluid. It's very unified and there's no like unnecessary pressure placed on each other to communicate in a way that might not be as natural to you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on to the next one. It kind of goes along with it. It's a good segue. Speak your mind because your spouse can't read it. Can I get a what from all the men out there?
Even when you really want them to.
Yeah. Can I get a shout out from the women?
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. So what we mean by this, of course, is communication.
Yes,
you know, we alluded to it in some of our first points where sometimes that lack of communication can bubble up over an argument and turn into some bigger conflict that lasts longer than you intended it to. But this is just, you know, good old fashioned advice for married folks to use your words and communicate exactly what you mean, what you need, you know, what you intend, what you hope for.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a lot in weeks past about dreaming together and that kind of communication. So communication goes a number of different directions here. But in this case, I think what we've learned is on some of the day-to-day expectations. Yeah. Like, you know, if you want me to take the trash out and I miss it that day, I need you to just say, hey, can you take the trash out? As opposed to, you know, stewing in your room and thinking, this deadbeat never takes the trash out, you know, and that's obviously not what you do. But I mean, I have expectations of you just nonstop telling me how good looking I am and how smart and talented and capable, but you know, you don't always hit the quota. And so I have to tell you.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take a quick second to speak specifically to all the women out there, those who are not yet married, those who are newly married. I want to talk specifically about those expectations that you've had in your mind around marriage, the things that you've imagined and like carried with you and daydreamed about maybe for many years. I think that women tend to have more of these. That's just my opinion. But I think we have just a lot of expectations on little tiny things. And so I think back to our first year of marriage and my birthday. So my birthday's in September. We got married in May. So just a few years in, or I'm sorry, just a few months in. Yeah. And so we're really
like a few years.
So we're really fresh into marriage. And long story short, I had such lofty expectations of what my birthday would look like as we were together as a married couple, because you have to take into consideration that before this, we were always long distance in our relationship. So I had this like huge expectation of having like a grandiose birthday celebration from the top of the morning to the evening, like the way that you were going to roll out the red carpet for me as your wife. Yeah. I didn't communicate that. We had a fine, like we went to a meal, I'm sure. And I remember we went for dessert. But I remember like having a little pity party breakdown, emotional roller coaster of a conversation that evening, because I think my expectations were like not met, but they were not communicated. Yeah. And I didn't want to communicate them. And I probably even said that. To you of like, I don't want to have to tell you this. But ladies, this is something that you will learn is whether you like it or not, you have to communicate those expectations. You might say to yourself, it doesn't feel very romantic for me to communicate those expectations. I just want him to know. Sure. Well, honey, he ain't gonna know. So you've got to communicate that. And what's wonderful is when you do communicate that, your spouse can take it and run with it. Yeah. And so our birthdays have become better and better, and the expectations have been met. And you know, you might go, well, that feels like being like a little princess trying to like tell them that you want it to be this way. No, it's just, I had to say, you know what? My birthday's really like special to me. Yeah. I might not want like a party, but I'm always going to want you to make it very special. Like, can you do that? Yeah. And Gabe always does that for me because he knows, because I've made it clear. So again, you're going to feel silly and you're not going to want to do that. But whether it's like an intimacy thing, whether it's an expectation like certain holidays or birthdays, whether it's the way you like the toilet paper on the roll, you need to tell your spouse that.
Sure. Well, and I was just going to say, I mean, all you really needed to say is, and I got it loud and clear now, is that my birthdays are a big deal. Like that's really the headline. Yep. And then the how, you know, every year can change and get creative. Exactly. And it can ebb and flow. I mean, this last year we had a 1-month-old, right? Yes. And so it was very low key. We got food at home, but it was so special, so magical because he was essentially your gift, you know? Yep. And so we we're, in a totally different place than we were the year before,
Yeah.
where we went on a big trip and this, that, and the other.
Right.
So I say this to my team a lot, where I want to delegate the result, not the task.
Yeah,
And so I
that's
think
good.
that's all you need to
Perfect way
do
to
is
say
to
it.
say, I want to feel special. I want to feel like you know me and like you tried. I'm
Yep.
not going to tell you exactly how to do it. That's the part that ruins the fun, right? So for the ladies, remember that line, like, I'm delegating the result to you, not the task.
Yeah.
And I think as a man, you could be like, aye, aye, soldier, I got you.
Okay, so the next one is seek to understand, not to undermine.
Yes.
And this comes into play like when you are in some sort of heated conversation and your spouse is very upset. Like you can really tell this is really heating them up. So it's about asking, what is it that's getting you to this place instead of raising up your temperature and meeting them there? It's really about going like, oh, wow, I can see that this is really bothering you. This has really hurt you. This is really angering you. Like, can you explain to me why? And go into like problem solving mode instead of going into like fixer mode, like put them in their place mode. And you have to kind of like level up to get there and to meet them in that place. It's about like actually being able to ground your spouse by saying like, wow, I see this. I recognize the emotion that you are putting off. Like I recognize what you're emoting.
Yeah. Game recognize game.
Game recognize game. And I want to talk about like what's gotten you there. And I'd love to have a conversation about it because I really do want to understand and I really want to work through it with you.
Yeah. And this one's obviously easier said than done in the moment because, again, when you are confronted with high temperature, like you called it, it's very tempting to raise up your temperature right there. Not only does a calm voice diffuse and contrast the louder voice in the argument, but if you're speaking with intentional words and you really mean what you're saying and asking when you're asking for understanding, it gives the other partner an opportunity to recognize, I'm overreacting. We're on the same team. I need to bring it down a notch and just speak like adults and actually communicate my needs. And that's another great opportunity to say that, when you said or did this, it made me feel like this, and to stay away from those always and those nevers. And, for us, we've really learned the power of asking questions and seeking understanding through simple, calm questioning in the heat of an argument. And it also, another tactic is really sort of labeling, essentially. You read some of this in negotiation books, like Never Split the Difference. But, when I hear you say something that might be really emotionally charged, if I can have the wherewithal to pause, repeat the thing that you just said and sort of label it back to you like, okay, so you think that I never do the dishes or whatever silly thing, And it allows you to hear those words back and say, well, of course you actually sometimes do the dishes, And, and I'm not trying to manipulate you or play some weird game. I'm just trying to lower the temperature. And I think when we both do that, it helps us recognize that we're not trying to win. That's not the goal of any argument, is one person winning and the other loses. So speaking of conflict, the next one kind of segues into that. And that is build up, don't tear down. With your words and the little things and the big things, we should always be laying a brick on and not, throwing a brick through the glass.
For sure. And I think that this one is great to think about in the little moments, like the little seemingly insignificant moments where you make a comment to your spouse. I think about it like if you have siblings, you kind of like pick at each other. You can get into a place in your marriage too where you sort of like pick or like poke at each other. And sure, sometimes it's all like fun and, it's mutual back and forth, but sometimes it really is just unnecessary picking and prodding and essentially kind of tearing each other down with like small bits of commentary. So, it's like, does that need to be said? It's like running the filter. Does that need to be said? How's that going to make my spouse feel? Is it life-giving? Or is it really non-essential? So like knowing when to pull back.
Well, and that goes for both when you're together and no one's watching, but maybe all the more when you're in public or when you're in private, but like with someone else, right? So, it's just never healthy to talk about your spouse in any negative light regardless, but
Yeah.
especially when they're not there, you know,
Oh,
and you're
yeah,
with your
for sure.
friends. And because, again, that's an easy time to maybe unpack something that you're going through, but that can quickly slip down
Yeah.
the slope of complaining and gossiping and maligning your partner.
Absolutely.
And then, back to the comment about being a bridge to your family, it's the same principle of being a bridge to whatever audience there is sitting in front of you, where now if I've told my buddies something about Grace that really wasn't true, but I just felt it in the moment, and then now, months later they present to me like, oh, how's that thing with Grace? And I'm
Right.
like, whoa, where'd you get that perspective from? And they're
Yeah.
like, from you.
Yes.
So that's a seed you do not want to plant.
Yeah, and I would say is just as much as it's not saying things that will tear your spouse down, it's go ahead and say the things that build them up.
Yes,
You might
so
think
good.
like, they don't need to hear that.
Yeah.
But you cannot, I don't think you can build your spouse up enough. Like
Yeah,
you
that's so
should
good.
say the nice little compliment of, hey, your hair looks really nice today, or
Thank you.
hey, thanks for helping me cook dinner, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Expressing those things really
Yeah.
does go a long way. And
Yes.
I think we all want to hear, whether your words of affirmation as a love language or not, we're all wanting to hear
Yeah.
those things from our spouse. So
Yeah.
go ahead and say it.
Yeah.
It only takes a second.
Amen. All right. You want to tell us the next one?
The next one is do what you say you're going to do. Follow through builds trust.
Yeah, again, we've been talking a lot about the little things in
Mm-hmm.
marriage, and I think this applies to the little things just as much as the big things.
Yeah.
So, when you're following through on your vows, on your commitments to each other, obviously that's the
For
big
sure.
things. But it even comes down to the little things like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing or run this errand. I will be home by this time. And just communicating that and then doing it,
Yeah.
or, hey, I'm going to, mow the lawn this Saturday because it's overgrown, and I've told you that I'm going to do it on this day and this time. I'm going to do that, and I follow
Yes.
through.
Yep.
It's like, it sounds silly, right? But like, saying you're going to be somewhere at, on time, and
Yep.
we show up and we're on time, so it's, for us, we found that what it boils down to is that the trait of trustworthiness and reliability is attractive in a
Yes,
relationship,
definitely.
right? And so you are perpetually trying to be more attractive essentially to your partner,
For
because
sure.
you're like, hey, look, I said I'm going to do something and then I did it.
Yeah.
And that's true for us. But as now we have a little son who I know is already watching our
Yeah.
movements, and specifically for myself as his father, I mean, I want to be honorable down to like, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to be right back, and
Yeah.
not just go on my laptop and peace out because he's playing
Right.
quietly by himself,
Yes.
I want my yay to be yay and my nay to be nay in all aspects of life. And so I just think that is a great way to invest in your relationship, is to build trust, to do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
That's obviously true in every other facet of life anyways,
Yeah.
but how much more valuable to apply that in your marriage.
So good. I just heard something the other day about like the child from 0 to 3 needs to feel safe,
Yeah.
and how that safety like really helps them in their development and goes on to shape the type of adult that they become.
Yeah.
The way that they live their life is that safety and those parameters. So like following through, I'll be
Yeah.
right back, and you are right
Yeah.
back. But I think even within a marriage, when a husband follows through on what he says he's going to do for the wife, that is allowing me to rest in you.
Yeah.
It's allowing me to rely on you. It's keeping me from being so self-sufficient. And someone
that's
might
good.
be like, well, shouldn't you be self-sufficient? But like, no, the whole point of a marriage is that there is a push and pull. There is a
Yeah.
leaning on one another. That's what that is the beauty of marriage, isn't
Yeah.
it? That we would lean on each other, that there would be trust, that I
Sure.
could fall back and rest and know
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that everything's not going to fall apart. Like there's something really beautiful in that. So I parallel it with the child, like feeling safe and being able to flourish
Yeah,
in life.
good.
I parallel it with the marriage, is like when you follow through on your word, you can rest in your role within the marriage,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
you can really reap the enjoyment of being fully in your role and not having to take over for
Yeah.
your spouse's role as well.
Yeah. So for this last and final lesson of what we've learned in 9 years of marriage is actually a bonus, right? Where we get a 6-for-1 deal
Yeah,
here. So these
for
are 6 daily things that you should do every single day, no matter what. We've tried our best to do them. We haven't been perfect, but we
Yeah.
feel like these are essential to just kind of keep your marriage at the peak of health.
Yes,
so,
definitely.
in no particular order, you should kiss every day.
Yes.
What's up, girl?
Yes, please.
You should hug every day. And we'll talk about some specifics with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You should just touch every day,
Yeah.
just non-sexual touches, just
Yes.
like, soft caresses, or you're
Yep.
brushing through the kitchen and you're like, hey, what's up? I love you.
Yep.
You should laugh every single day. Guys, if you're not laughing,
It's
what
the
are you
best
doing?
medicine.
You should pray every single day
Yeah.
if you're a believer. And lastly, you should say I love you every day. Come on.
Yes.
It's not that hard.
For sure.
So
Yeah, these are all essentials. I mean, we have some specifics when it comes to the kiss.
ooh, tell them.
We have heard that kissing for 6 seconds helps to trigger that oxytocin release,
Yep.
that love hormone, that bonding hormone. So try to accentuate that kiss
Oh,
for a
snap.
few seconds. The hug should
Yep.
be 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So again,
This is science,
you want to
guys.
get that oxytocin flowing.
Yep.
Hold on to each other for 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sweet one.
Yep.
It really does actually just like,
Well, and
relax
you might hear this and cringe and you're like, are you serious? You have to force yourselves to do this. But these never really came into play as much as they have post baby. Where we would do a lot of this naturally. We just like,
for sure.
because it's just us in the house and we're walking around like, what's up? I love you. And hold
Yep.
each other. Now when, you're like,
Sorry, but I just thought about those those memes online of like couples like holding each other in the theme park.
oh yeah. In the line at Busch Gardens and like,
Yes,
just
they're
like
just
PDA.
when you
all
said
over.
we would just hold each other.
Yeah,
I just
we would hold
imagined.
each other like amusement park line at Islands of Adventure.
Yeah, like a couple dating at Busch Gardens.
Yeah, that has like not gotten enough of each other for that day.
Sorry, it's so cringe.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Anyways, so we would do that naturally before, but
Yeah.
then now when we're just like in the fog of war with baby and this and that,
There's a
and
lot
I've
of
got
things
vomit on
going
me,
on.
and your hair is crazy, and you're like looking at me like, have I showered this week? Not
Right.
really. That's more like my problem. But anyways, we've like kind of come back to this this little
Definitely.
rule, and we're like, hey, remember, we need to do this,
Yeah.
and it's a great way to sort of jumpstart you and to get you back into a rhythm of being romantic versus just roommates.
Yes, because the roommate phase is real in that you have another life that you're
Yeah.
keeping alive and taking care of, and there's so many new tasks like within the home
Yeah.
when you have a baby. So I do love having some things that you can fall back on and go like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
We haven't kissed yet today. Let's take a second for that. Let's take 6 seconds for that.
Yeah.
And really going through that little checklist
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
The laughter, I said it before, but laughter is the best medicine. I
sure.
think that we have always made each other laugh a lot, and that's such
Yeah.
a gift in our marriage. I really enjoy that
Yeah.
and love that. If that doesn't come natural, like you don't have a lot of banter, find something to watch together that
Yeah.
makes you laugh,
Yeah.
or engage in conversation and get yourselves to that place, because it is so sweet to share
Yeah.
laughter with your spouse.
Yes, absolutely. Men, Google some dad jokes. Just have them on deck. They'll be so bad that it'll actually force them to laugh.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
There you
You're
go.
great at that.
Backhanded compliment. And then, of course, praying together and saying "I love you" together. Like for us,
Yeah.
that's obviously core to our faith that we're praying together. But again, that's something that you can kind of just fall into your own separate ways and rhythms
Definitely.
for. And so we found that when we are praying together, it's just aligning us, it's setting us up for all these other things to happen
Yep.
more smoothly, right?
Yep. And really practically just thinking about where to fit in prayer together as a married couple. I think, sitting down together for a meal, that's a really easy rhythm to incorporate
Yep.
prayer before the meal. It could be 30 seconds, but it's just taking a moment, take a deep breath, and really engage in a genuine prayer together. Or it could be, praying for each other before you go to bed, or first thing in the morning, just little touch points. Or even sometimes we'll send each other a texted
Yeah.
prayer like, hey, I'm praying for you, and just
Yeah.
like pray and like put it out in text form and send it. And it's a way to really unite spiritually as
Yeah,
well, which
good.
makes such a difference.
Absolutely. If you haven't already, by the way, like, subscribe, follow us on all of our social channels. And this has been another episode of Quality Time with Gabe and Grace. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Grace, and we'll see you next time.
All right, adios.
Time to love again. My time for love is here.